Good morning and welcome to Friday's OTB AM. It's Adrian with you on this freezing cold Friday morning, and as always back in the hot seat after his time in Hamburg, Owen.
Yeah, are we going to have this conversation again?
Absolutely, third day running.
A different presenter for the third day, so we may as well just replicate the exact same conversation we've had for the last 2 mornings.
Did you have a good time on holidays?
I did have a very good time, yes.
What was the highlight?
Well, that's a good question now. That's a new question that hasn't been asked by your...
My work is done here. That's it from OTB AM this morning.
The highlight, I would say, is...
the highlight that you can actually tell us, I suppose, is maybe the...
Yeah, I'm just going to vaguely say Hamburg was the highlight.
Really?
So I went to numerous other places.
I was planning to go to Hamburg for a week. How long were you there for?
I was only there for 4 nights.
3 weeks?
No, I was...
What were you doing for the 3 weeks you were off?
What do you mean, what was I doing? I wasn't off for 3 weeks.
How long were you off for?
I was off for like 12 days.
And so you were 4 days in Hamburg?
Yeah, 4 days in Cologne and 4 days in Brussels.
All right.
Yeah. So very nice Christmas markets. If you'd like to go and purchase some Christmas goods.
Glühwein.
Exactly. I wasn't quite sure what Glühwein was. I was like, am I becoming a glue addict here or something? And you can get like Glühwein mit rum. I'm like, you're having glue. I'm having wine.
They serve that in the 72-hour clubs, do they?
No, that's not that classy. Unfortunately, it's the Christmas markets are a far more classy affair.
So if I'm planning to venture off to Europe, Central Europe for my sort of pre-Christmas holidays and drink up a bit of Glühwein, like give us some sort of a recommendation here on. You're being way too vague. We'd need something specific. Well,
literally all these cities are packed to the rafters with Christmas markets. You cannot miss an opportunity to drink Glühwein.
Right.
It's everywhere you look. It's not like Dublin. I'm not sure.
What else? I mean, what else is there to do? Like, I mean, you go over there, you have a bit of Glühwein, you have a bit of Christmas biscuits.
Well, like Christmas
That's what
biscuits.
they're calling them these days.
Yeah. Gingerbread men, is that the word you're looking for?
One, yeah.
Well, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. I find Germany's a very, very interesting country. If you're interested in history, there's plenty of stuff to do in that regard.
Christmas biscuits might well be it's a brand new thing.
That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Like, whatever you were trying to refer to there, I'm not sure was there some sort of innuendo, but Christmas biscuits, it's on the Barry menu this Christmas.
It's the beauty of innuendo, and it can just be whatever you're having yourself. And speaking of which, we've a busy show coming up for you between now and 9 o'clock. We're going to get stuck into the back pages of the newspapers in just a few minutes, give you a bit of a flavour of what's coming up there, and we're going to delve into them a little bit deeper, a little later on. Some interesting stuff there as always. Ronan O'Gara in the Examiner will feature. We're going to bring you some exclusive footage from our event at the Stella Cinema in Rathmines last night, where we had none other than Warren Gatland along to mull through the life and times of one Warren Gatland. So we'll bring you some of that very shortly indeed. We are going to preview the weekend's Champions Cup action. We're into round 3, and Andy Dunn is going to join us on the line to discuss all of that. We're going to have our 2 finest football pundits, one of them not technically a pundit, in studio before, I think around 8:30 or thereabouts. We're going to have Nathan Murphy and Kevin Kilbane for the weekly football slot, for which we still have no name, but it does involve a chicken, a squeaky chicken. So if you've got any thoughts on what that unnamed as yet football slot should be, do get in contact with us. And a little bit later on, then we'll give you a flavour of what's coming up on Off the Ball over the weekend. But I mentioned Warren Gatland. He was with us in the Stella last night. Owen, it was fairly phenomenal night. We weren't really sure what to expect from the evening, if I'm being honest, because like Warren Gatland obviously has the persona that he has, and like you never presume to know somebody given a bunch of press conferences. But we've had an interesting relationship with Warren Gatland in this country over the years. He was at the helm of Irish rugby at a time where the game was going through a fairly transformative phase, and he left in interesting enough circumstances. So we're going to hear from Warren from last night over the next few days, because there was a whole bunch of stuff, as he said last night himself, that he hasn't spoken about over the years until last night.
Can you give any spoilers?
Yeah, I don't want to give too much away. We're gonna hear a clip very shortly, one of them, but he talks about his relationships with various people who were involved with him around the setup. One of them was the one spoiler maybe that I'll give is that he spoke about one of the most famous or infamous stories in Irish sport, somewhere sitting below Saipan, is the night of the long knives, where Warren Gatland gets sensationally axed at sort of 2 o'clock in the morning by a bunch of RFU Blazers, and he says it never happened.
Right. What did happen? that you can't reveal.
A version of that wasn't quite as dramatic.
So it wasn't 2 a.m. It wasn't the number of Blazers.
He kind of felt there was a select few people.
It wasn't like a Pat Hickey moment where he's just there in his bathrobe and he's told you're out of the job.
Let's definitely not bring that image to mind. But no, it was a really interesting night. It was a great night. The Stella Cinema, it was my first time in there. It's been reopened, an old cinema in Rathmines. It's been beautifully done up. And it itself sort of creates a bit of a odd, like a very different dynamic, I guess, from other shows we would do, because you're sitting in this uber luxurious cinema seat. I'm going to sit back, I'm going to have my beer, and you just carry on and entertain me. That was kind of the essence of the night.
A premium experience. The one thing I want to ask you more about that, just in case you can't reveal it, because I actually am very looking forward to seeing what Gatland says. But what's he like backstage?
So I met him so you're used to looking at a Warren Gatland or a version of Warren Gatland because you see him on the TV all the time doing like post-match interviews, press conferences, and I've been to several of them. And it wasn't really the Warren Gatland that we met last night. And maybe that's not actually that surprising really, but it was a different kind of guy. I did a short, might have been 8-9 minutes with him pre-show, a piece that will be going out at some point, I'm sure, over the next few days. So I had a bunch of stuff I wanted to talk about. During the conversation, again, in terms of stuff that he hadn't spoken about before, he reveals how he studied Irish history at Waikato University before he ever came to Ireland. I was like, oh, why would you have done that? And it was just like, I was kind of interested in the history of the area, and so we kind of went on that for a while. And yeah, just interesting. And then after the show, when everything that was said, we all went back upstairs, and I found myself in a triumvirate conversation with Keith Wood, who himself has had an interesting historical relationship with Warren Gatland and Warren and myself.
Oh, that was a great little love triangle to be involved in.
Oh my word! I chose not to sort of say too much. I mean, what I was going to offer into the conversation.
I dare say you didn't need to say too much being involved in that conversation.
Well, at one point I did feel as if I should say, listen lads, this is the sort of conversation it was. I said, listen, maybe I should just sort of take off.
Right.
They were like, no, you're fine. Which, I mean, I was literally going to get the popcorn out and you carry on.
That's amazing. And did anything like that transpire on stage at all between the two lads?
Yeah, there was a lot of very deep and honest conversation.
Right.
Gatland said several times, I haven't spoken about this before, or I've chosen not to speak about it before, or this is the first time I'm speaking about it. So
I think there's an element of good rugby men who are kind of very in touch with themselves, as in they're not afraid to kind of play a game with the media, which Gatland does quite a bit, but they're also not afraid to be kind of emotional about things, wear their heart in their sleeve, kind of like Gatland showed during the summer when the New Zealand media were having a go at his son and stuff like that. He got kind of deeply, he got deeply hurt by that.
He said that last night, that he was furious, yeah.
And he wasn't afraid to show that, but at the same time, he's not afraid to play hardball with the press when he needs to. So they've got that double-edged sword, and I think it's very prevalent in rugby. I'm not sure if I'm being overly stereotypical here. Maybe it's something to do with the attritional nature of the sport, but certainly they can mix it up. They have that kind of calculated mind when they're chatting to the press sometimes, but also they're not afraid to completely let loose. And I'd imagine what you heard backstage was passionate stuff.
By the way, like I was utterly won over by the man last night. Utterly won over. It wasn't that he's this amazingly charismatic personality or anything like that, but I felt there was a blunt, brutal honesty about him that started to make sense with a lot of the stuff that he's spoken about over the last few years, certainly in terms of the Lions and his protection of his players, and how I think he's kind of willing to fling himself under a bus at times to protect those around him. And the fact that it's, whatever it is, not quite 20 years, but 17, 18 years later before he's decided to speak about the end of days for his time at Irish Rugby was, in itself, people don't do that anymore. People sort of use the opportunity to vent, and obviously he's even just released a book, which he, again, hasn't spoken about it, so... but he has with us, and there's lots of good stuff to come from that over the next few days. Hopefully we've whetted the appetite there. We're going to sate some of that appetite now by giving you a bit of a flavour of what happened last night. Here's Ger in conversation with Warren Gatland, Keith Wood and Brian O'Driscoll at the Stella Cinema last night, and here they're talking about a selection dilemma.
But it is interesting for us, because I think this might be the first time that you guys have spoken about this on the same stage, or certainly sharing a platform. There's been a lot of speculation about what happened around that time. It's been dubbed the Night of the Long Knives. Eddie O'Sullivan has spoken about it in his book. One of the things he puts the difficulties that you had down to was your unwillingness to play the politics game, that the Blazers would be at events and you wouldn't go and say hello to them, you wouldn't play that game. He mentions an incident in a lift where there's 6 or 7 of them and you're kind of ignoring them. And in a way, in retrospect, I don't think that's the worst thing, you know, but ultimately it cost you your job. Or did it?
Look, I don't know. I mean, I'll tell you a story that I've never repeated, and I haven't even told the person this. So we selected the team to play Scotland, and in the team was Ronan Nagara to start at 10, and at midnight that night I get a knock on my door, and it's Eddie and Brian and Eddie says to me, "I think we've made a mistake at 10." And I said, "Okay." He said, "I think we should look at and change the 10s around and pick David Humphries." And I said, "Do you really think that?" And I said, he said, "Yeah, I think we've made a mistake there." I said, "Okay, right." So we changed the team sheet. The team was being announced the next day, and so we put David Humphries to start 10. I think Kieran Dawson started 7, and there was another debatable selection. So the next day we name David Humphries at 10 and we leave Ronan Nagara out. And later that day Ronan Nagara comes to me and says, "I'm pretty disappointed about being left out of the team and not being selected. I've spoken to Eddie, and Eddie said to me at the end of the day, you were the coach and you had the final say." So, and I never said anything to Ronan. I've never ever told him that story. And you know, so you know those.
What did you say to Eddie?
I didn't say anything to Eddie in the end. You know, so we struggled from a personal point of view in terms of a relationship, but
From the start.
That's the first time I've heard that story. I will say that subsequently I've had 10 conversations with Eddie where he has changed his selection at night time. He'd wake up in the morning and said, "We've made a mistake, we're going to change the selection, we're going to do something else." I think that would have been par for the course for him.
Yeah, flavour there of Warren Gatland in conversation with Ger and Keith and Brian at the Stella Cinema last night. Lots more of that to come over the next few days, and it's most of it was pretty much along those lines. A pretty brutally honest conversation with Warren Gatland last night, where he reveals loads of details about the relationships that he had. Like, I mean, I think the process of what they're talking about there, the thing that happened, is not that unusual actually. That coaches, managers, like they're going to tend to change their mind about things as they go, and that's absolutely their right. Obviously, I did find it actually odd on Gatland's part watching back there. He didn't say to Eddie O'Sullivan afterwards here, like in terms of the clear sort of the relationship was not a good relationship between Eddie O'Sullivan and Warren Gatland. I think everybody accepts that, and both have spoken about it before. But why you wouldn't turn around to Eddie O'Sullivan afterwards and go, "Here, what conversation did you have? Because we got to be on the same page here."
It seems like kind of coaching 101 that you would actually be on that level of communication with your colleagues, particularly after this seems to happen where communication has gone completely awry. The guy that you feel is your starting 10 suddenly feels that you're the guy who was the main player in him not starting in this game. I don't think he mentions the opposition for this match, but we can safely assume that it was
Scotland.
It was Scotland, right? Okay, so it was a Six Nations match. It was a big game,
yeah.
And suddenly Gatland is almost taking the bullet here when he doesn't necessarily need to, and I'm not sure how far he sees his Ireland tenure going at this point, how far he sees that Eddie might become the next Ireland manager, and that's a very interesting political thing, and it's a very interesting political move that Gatland just lets this one slide, that he's like, "No, I'm going to take this bullet, it's fine." Like, I'm not sure, is that to do with his kind of view of Ronan O'Gara, or is it to do with his view on Eddie O'Sullivan?
I think that's just his view of how he goes about things. That's his, seemingly his, as I said, when you hear him talk last night about a bunch of that stuff, a lot of things that we've heard about Warren Gatland that we've been scratching our head about suddenly start to make a bit of sense, because he is happy to take that bullet, or to, because like in that instance, he would have also taken the bullet publicly. That wouldn't have changed. It's just that he and Eddie would have had a conversation about it, and they would have said, listen, either, look, that's not the way you should have done that. You should have said, listen, as a coaching staff, as a group, this is the decision we should have made. But publicly, he would have still...
Yeah, to be fair, he's the head coach.
That would have taken it. So,
yeah, sure.
And rightly so. I think he wouldn't, nor would he shy away from that.
Yeah, but it's interesting as well how it's now he's speaking to talk about, choosing to speak about this, because maybe he just hasn't done that many interviews on this island, like obviously...
He mentioned himself last night, the Late Late Show, like, but I mean, again, I don't know if that's a format that necessarily is going to follow an avenue down to a sort of, to that last night. And it actually didn't seem particularly predetermined that he arrived into Dublin yesterday to get all this stuff off his chest.
No.
Like, speaking to him afterwards, he was sort of like, well, you know, like, it wasn't as if I'm coming to say all these things and they're very easy things for me to say. There was none of that, really.
That's the thing. If he wants to flog his book, he just talks about Sean O'Brien for an hour and a half, and that's it. It's the book sold.
Yeah, and like these stories are not in his book. The book hardly came up last night. So, but that was it. It was very interesting and revealing, and gives you very good insight, as good as anything, I would say, into the personality that is Warren Gatland, and we've lots more of that to come for you. Just check out and stay tuned to offtheball.com and all the usual channels over the next few days, and we'll bring you much more of that. We are going to stay with the rugby in just a few minutes, because we're going to be joined on the line by Andy Dunn to preview the weekend's Champions Cup action. But before all of that, there's lots of rugby and other good stuff in the back pages this morning. Just gone 8 o'clock, by the way, if you're on your way to work on this Friday morning. I would wrap up well. There was snow on the...
Frost.
There was snow. No, there was a I don't want to say a downpour, because it wasn't quite that, but there was snow on my route on the way into work today.
Right, okay. Maybe sleet. We'll settle for sleet.
No, it was snow. It was like sort of gently landing snow.
Okay.
It's freezing cold outside. It is slippy underfoot.
It has been...
Careful out there.
Science dictates that it's been fierce mild up until this point. Today is the first day that it hasn't been fierce mild.
Spoken by a true Kerry man. Go on.
Absolutely. We'll start with the Irish Daily Star. We're going to look at some of the football leads along the back pages. And Andrei Kanchelskis has been talking today. No can do, Jose reads the back of the Irish Daily Star. He's talking about Jose Mourinho, and a lot of comparisons made this week between Jose and Pep, and who's the better manager. It's a pretty simplistic debate, but one that Kanchelskis has weighed in on. He says, do I rate Guardiola over Mourinho? At the moment, yes. He said, who echoed the view last week of former teammate Eric Cantona in criticising Mourinho's pragmatic style. You've also got Miracle Man Jack there on the back page, who, of course, that ride yesterday was just absolutely incredible at Clonmel. It's like, I'm sure if you haven't seen it yet, it is definitely the first thing you need to look at on YouTube or on Twitter this morning. It is absolutely amazing. Not only to just hold on to the horse, but to win the thing.
Oh, phenomenal. That Kanchelskis stuff is a load of bollocks.
Okay.
I had a good read, because there's across a lot of newspapers today. He's saying we're not playing like Alex Ferguson anymore. You know, it wasn't like we used to play under Fergie. We played a lot of 4-4-2. We got the wingers involved. Andre, the game has changed. Like, it's changed utterly. And the point he makes about Manchester City are the entertainers now. Yes, they are. Like, that's the way things are. And like, what does Mourinho do? Does he go, listen, I'm going to try and match that for flair and for style and for chewing gum for the eyeballs, Ted? Or am I going to actually play what's been described everywhere you see it now as pragmatic football?
Yeah.
It's go with, like, they're also winning games. It's not amazing football to look at. Like, there are definite sort of Louis van Gaal traces about the football he's playing, except for he's getting results. Why would you do anything else?
Yeah, I agree with you. And just on that point, a lot of people have been saying recently, everybody's calling Jose Mourinho pragmatic, a park-to-bus manager. Look at all the goals they've scored. Now I disagree with that argument. Goals doesn't necessarily dictate that the football you're playing is bubblegum football or whatever you use there. Chewing gum football?
Chewing gum for the eyes, Ted.
Chewing gum for the eyes, Ted, that's it. That doesn't necessarily translate. It's just an unbelievably simplistic view. It's like, here's a stat that proves my argument. It doesn't prove any argument, the stat that they've scored loads of goals. They are playing pragmatically, and the reason they're scoring goals is because they've been very pragmatic. They are breaking down an opposition in a very cold manner, and they are scoring goals as a result of that. It's kind of like that point I brought up yesterday, that like you have Pogba, and people tend to look at his average position. Oh, Paul Pogba's position is far too up the pitch, therefore he's a terrible defender. No, he could be excellent without the ball in that position. It's just this kind of presentation of one statistic to back up a point is completely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I do take your point as well. But I do think it connects with this.
I just think it's like he's just
thing.
a man who's totally. I've absolutely no idea what Andrew Kanchelskis is doing with his life anymore. I didn't recognise the man, I have to say, from the photograph. Now, to be fair, it's like you've seen this sort of slick, svelte, fairly handsome-looking winger in a team that was full of fairly handsome-looking wingers, actually.
But he was the most pragmatic winger of all time.
Yeah.
He just knocked the ball past the defender and just ran after it.
It was a different time and a different era. And I don't know what he's doing with his life at the minute, Andrew Kanchelskis. He might be very heavily
he's got a book out.
Ah, well, there we go.
That's the one.
He may be very heavily involved with football. I suspect that he probably isn't, given some of the comments that he's made. He's living in a time that has had its day.
Yeah, it's called Russian Winters, for anybody who's interested. It's actually got a very, very nice cover. It's actually the nicest autobiography cover
like
I've seen in a while. It's like the Russia 2018 poster.
Exactly, yeah. Right, lots of good stuff about the football across the back pages, the front pages of the sports sections as well this morning, including this from the Evening Herald ahead of the two derbies at the weekend. It's face-off here, Derby Day in Manchester and Liverpool to set the season alight. Both of those games, by the way, you can hear full live commentary of them on Off the Ball on News Talk on Sunday. But so it's the Manchester Derby and it's the Liverpool Derby. We're going to talk about much more about those with Nathan and Kevin a bit later on, and you can hear the thoughts of John Giles inside and also Brent Pope on the rugby.
We will change tack. We'll stick with the football, but we will change tack a little bit, and we'll turn to Bilbao 2020. This is on the back of the Times Ireland edition. Ireland get 2020 Bilbao trip, reads the headline. There should be a massive if after that. Should Ireland qualify for the 2020 Euros? They should qualify. It'll be even easier than the last Euros to qualify for, but the whole story is that they're guaranteed to be in Spain's group should they qualify because of the host city nature. And also there on the back page, Earls hopes Munster pair will stay put. You can put two and two together there as to who he's talking about. The Bilbao thing, so this is really interesting because it's one of the first times that we've had predetermined groups. Like essentially if both teams make it to the Euros, they're both going into Group E and they're both going to play each other. Like it's almost it's a bizarre enough dynamic, isn't it? Because it's particularly Spain. Like in terms of your carrot to get to a major championships is never really about like it's not much of a carrot to get to the European Championships and then be rewarded by being guaranteed to have to play Spain. Yeah, it's true. I don't have the information off the top of my head as to whether or not the top two go through. So potentially there's another character is like, you lose to Spain, but you beat the other person in your own backyard, which will be the case with Ireland, and you'll go through. I presume it'll be kind of like a top two group, given the new way that European football is working at the moment. That everybody is rewarded.
There's 114 teams, something like officially that are going to qualify for the Euros.
Yeah, exactly. So, I don't think it necessarily diminishes it a little bit. There's something a little bit kind of cool about the definition of where you're going to be playing, as in. Like you'll see the headline saying, "Oh, Ireland win League of Nations" or whatever it's called to get Bilbao trip or whatever.
Nations, absolutely.
Like Bilbao's an amazing place.
Sure, it's great. The museum. I was there last year.
We're on your own here, Adrian.
I'm going to dig that out, and somebody's got to Facebook us in or tweet us in and let us know. The Gaudi.
Oh, Gaudi, yeah.
Gaudi Museum. The one, the
Gaudi is Barcelona. Yeah, they are.
Silver. It's got the silver shell on it.
Right.
It's got a massive bear outside. I was in it last year. I will think about it.
Gaudi is the architect.
Yeah, he didn't just design stuff in Barcelona. He had impact elsewhere as well.
There you go.
I think that might be it. But I mean, it's just my main sort of reticence on that story is organised sport at that level predetermining anything. Really, is my kind of makes me a little bit uneasy.
But it's not predetermining it.
Well, it doesn't come any more predetermined than saying Ireland will play Spain.
It doesn't get any more predetermined than saying Spain are going to beat Ireland. The match still has to be played.
I know that.
We just know who it's going to be determined against.
We take that for granted that they will beat us. The other thing that I find bizarre about it is that, like, the predeterminedness of the cities. If Ireland don't qualify, for example, there's going to be a bunch of games in Dublin. That'll be weird.
It would be weird. There's still going to be games not involving Ireland played in Dublin. But yeah, it would be strange if Ireland have no part in the competition in which they're playing.
Philip Quinn is also writing about that same story in the back page of the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Spanish test, Ireland will face La Roja if they qualify for Euro 2020 there. Move abroad unthinkable, insists Earls, who's been up in front of the media this week ahead of Munster's Champions Cup game against Leicester Tigers this weekend. And he's had lots of interesting stuff to say, including about his relationship with the departing, we can sort of always pre-reference him now as the departing Simon Zebo. Gunners make it 6 of the best. That was following their Europa League game against Bate Borisov last night.
Amazing. Winning 6-0 when it doesn't matter one iota.
Sam, you can say the same for Everton last night. Did a good win.
Kind of true. Without their
Sam didn't
manager.
even turn up. He had some sort of medical appointment.
Unfortunate. On the back of the Sun it says, "Ell of a draw for 2020. Spain clash on cards if we can't qualify." That horrifying picture in the background, murder on Gdansk floor, as Fernando Torres slots home beyond Shea Given. Also an interesting one there on the left-hand panel, cash and curry for Ashley. Mike Ashley and potential Newcastle owner Amanda Staveley have had their first talks in a London curry house, which is an interesting place. Potentially Staveley's idea. I think she's got big business interests in, well, maybe not a curry place, but certainly in the Middle East. She's got big business interests. I'm not sure if she's got business interests in the Far East as well, where obviously you can acquire the best curry.
Okay. I don't know where we're going with that one. There are good curry houses in London.
I don't know. Of course there are. And
good headline, by the way. That's maybe headliner of the day right there.
It's the only reason I called it out, to be honest, because of the headline.
The back page of the Irish Mirror sports section. Come on, Auba, to our place. That's pretty good. That's up there. Aubameyang. Big Sam is ready to launch a £60 million January raid for Aubameyang as the man to replace Lukaku, writes Darren Lewis, an exclusive on the back page of the Mirror here. And 60 million is not a sum that we're that used to hearing in relation to Everton, but they have new ownership, obviously, or co-ownership in the last few months, so that might be a new departure for them, and reflections then as well on the Europa League that nobody really cares about.
Let's change tack to rugby, and we'll show you the front page of the Irish Examiner sports section. It is the Exeter factor. Ronan O'Gara and Gareth Steenson on rugby's new chiefs. And conventional wisdom, changes coming in Cork GAA, even if it's slow paced. You've also got risk and reward. Keith Earls on the lure of rugby abroad. And that man, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's got his 5th Ballon d'Or to move level with arch rival Messi. So the whole statistical nature of the Ronaldo versus Messi debate has kind of gone out the window now because they're level pegging.
Yeah, there's good. It's the weekly debate. We were saying we'd Kieran Donaghy. We dispensed with one Kerry man last Friday, and we replaced him with another one. We Kieran Donaghy in here with us last Friday morning, and he managed to displace O'Gara from the front page of the Examiner, which in itself was a feat, obviously. But there's good stuff as always from O'Gara there. We'll get into a bit more detail later on. He's talking about Joey Carberry specifically, and been some talk. You might have heard it here first of Carberry maybe sort of leaving Leinster to try and get himself some game time, but O'Gara is saying, Joey, you need to stay put, that the best thing you can do is stay there and fight for your place, that Johnny Sexton isn't going to last forever. He's 32 and maybe you're going to get your chance sooner rather than later. Yeah,
the two boys yesterday, Quinlan and Darcy, kind of agreed with that notion that he should stay put.
Yeah.
So I guess
it's not to say you could leave the province and come back 2 years later, like it's...
For sure, I think the general wisdom
himself has done it.
Yeah, the general wisdom is that Carberry, even by not playing at the moment, is still learning a lot from Johnny Sexton. There will come a point, obviously, that he needs to play himself all the time to actually put that wisdom into practice.
The difficulty is that he's not even the backup 10 at Leinster.
Well, I think
that's the biggest thing.
But like the conversation about where Joey Carberry will play isn't over yet. Like there just seems to have been an acceptance amongst us that Joey Carberry's going to be a 10, full stop. Since when have we given up on the notion of Carberry as a 15?
Well, Carberry himself wants to play 10.
Well, he said yesterday that he will play wherever he's put.
I know, but that's the coach. Just put me in. I don't mind where I go. He said it was during the November series. He said 10 is where I want to end up playing. And now. But to be fair, there is definitely a point in what you're saying, because Stuart Lancaster...
like 7 games at 15. I mean, play another 7 at least. Play a full season at 15.
Yeah, but if he wants to be 10, then it's only a stopgap to get him into the team. He's brilliant at 15, but it's just a stopgap, ultimately, that he's going to end up at 10. I think everybody accepts that. Stuart Lancaster made a good point. He was on with us during the November series, one of our Aviva fan studios, and he was saying that he can play 15, sometimes he can play 10, and let's not get overly sort of hyped up by the idea that we put him in this little box and he's either a 10 or he doesn't play at all. So that was a good point, actually. We do tend to get a bit sort of wound up about compartmentalising players. Rugby all the way on the back page, front page of the sports section of the Irish Times this morning. So much to admire in the rise of Exeter to Europe's elite. We'll talk to this, but about this with Andy Dunn very shortly. It's an interesting story at Exeter, who were only promoted to the Premiership in 2010. They haven't really spent a huge amount of money. A good shot here of Jack Noel, who's one of those players who's come through at Exeter. He's got some pretty interesting tattoo action. Was one of my main takeaways here. You can see on his right leg there, it's a tattoo of an Indian chief. Munster want O'Halloran to replace Zebo is one of the other big stories here. That's across a lot of the pages today, that Turner O'Halloran is a wanted man.
And on the back of the Irish Independent, it's a GEA story by Colin Keys here. Wexford's team costs increased by 250 grand. It's kind of like a widespread story here of the just mad jumps in expenses for all the teams. Kind of puts it down to the deal between the GPA and the GEA in 2016 for added expenses for players as one of the reasons for all of this. But Wexford, the big risers in terms of GEA expenditure.
The Racing Post this morning, it's Owen mentioned Jack Kennedy a bit earlier on. One of Kerry's finest.
Yeah,
never spurned an opportunity to mention Kerry. Is the short story.
Certainly Kerry's best ever former pony jockey.
Frequently, so this video exists, and we'll try and bring it to you before 9 o'clock if we can. Owen sort of described it a bit earlier on, but at times it can be difficult. Do you know what? Let's take a look at Jack Kennedy's unbelievable ride yesterday at Thurles.
But two horrible falls, especially the one from Andrew Lynch, but what a recovery by Jack Kennedy. Here he's spotting the first time around on Robin Damana. Down he's come, totally gone as you would think. Looked like he'd no chance, he was going to drop off him. Hands never moved.
That's, I think, Kevin Ryan on At the Races. That was phenomenal.
Yeah, incredible.
Like ridiculous stuff.
And not only that, he goes and wins the thing.
I actually thought that he might have been pinged afterwards for pushing that other horse up onto the rail.
I did think about that, all right. Was he kind of moving into his path or whatever? But clearly not.
They've obviously said, listen, in the grand scheme of things, you were trying to hang on to a horse because, I mean, you're also trying to hang on because if he falls at that position that he was in towards the head of the field, it's perilous.
Yeah, absolutely. It's common sense prevailing, that decision.
What else have we got? We've been through them, is that?
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
There's the Examiner as well, that picture of Cristiano Ronaldo, pretty smug looking. He does a good line in smug, to be fair. Does Ronaldo picking up his 5th Ballon d'Or. FIFA removed investigator on Mutko's trial, so that story rumbles on. Excuse me. So that is the back pages of the sports sections this morning. We're going to get into a bit more detail on them and on. It's 17 minutes past 8 on this Friday morning. We're delighted to have you with us. Do keep in contact with us, keep the comments coming. We've had Noel Cahill in touch to say that he thinks Gatland is a great coach and he gets too hard time from the Irish media. That certainly was one of the themes last night. Not just the Irish media, to be fair. I think the New Zealand media is kind of the famous instance of Gatland getting a pretty hard time. John Smith, why are you still discussing Brian O'Driscoll getting dropped years ago? It's over, move on. Andy Dunn, good morning to you.
How are you guys?
We've been told to move on, so we better do just that. Some interesting stuff from more of that stuff from Warren Gatland to come over the next few days. But the Champions Cup, Andy, that we want to have some conversation with you about this morning. Exeter and Leinster at Sandy Park on Sunday is one of the more interesting games of the weekend. Both teams very well set in the pool as it goes, and like this Exeter story, reading about it over the last few days, like it's just such an interesting story of a team who were only promoted to the top tier of English rugby in 2010 and they haven't really spent big. It's a really interesting story.
I love the story of Exeter Rugby. I think it's very similar to Leicester City Football Club. The one differentiation being that Exeter won a premiership last year and they've backed it up this year. Leicester City Football Club obviously nosedived in the first 6 months of their second season under Ranieri. Exeter Chiefs with Rob Baxter, Ali Heaford, they've obviously an outstanding coaching team because they're not hugely resourced. They don't have superstars, and they've got a team of unsung heroes essentially. But they take it, they optimise everything they've got.
Andy, is this going to be the future of how English and French rugby might progress in a club sense? Because the stereotype is out there that, they've got wads of cash and they're just going to keep spending big. But suddenly we've got quite a frugal club here who spend quite smartly. And if this bubble does happen to burst in terms of the big spending clubs, Exeter might have paved the way to the new light that might happen in club rugby.
Yeah, they seem really enlightened. If you look at rugby as a larger market, you're probably going to take into account that it's not a global game, but players, while they command reasonable fees, clubs are not actually making any money. So if you're going to buy big, you need a billionaire investor, the likes of Montpellier have with Mohad Altrad. That I don't think is sustainable, because unless a billionaire wants to take on a rugby club as a plaything, it's not really a good model. So the Exeter model is very innovative, and I would love to see it become the future of professional rugby, similar to how Leinster are operating on tighter budgets and bringing through young players from an academy setup.
Yeah, it is an interesting story that I definitely recommend having a read about. I think like a former Royal Marine who set up a communications company that's got like a £25 million turnover, 125 staff. Just a really fascinating story. But on the pitch, I mean, the personification of that story are a couple of Irish players there who have, I guess, been spat out of the Irish system, haven't really got the opportunity. And one of them key tomorrow in Gareth Steenson, like reading today that himself and Sexton at one point were playing for the under-20s, and it was Steenson who got the nod over him, but their career trajectories kind of post that have gone fairly opposite directions.
Yeah, Steenson's hugely underrated. He had a 10-year testimonial in Exeter recently, so he's a huge local hero there. Can't be underestimated how important any side is an 85-90% place kicker. A goal kicker like that who can convert under pressure, which he's done on numerous occasions, most notably probably towards the tail end of the Premiership season when it really mattered last year and they were in the Championship minutes. So Steenson's story is, I suppose it's one that got away for Ireland. However, I think his general game, apart from his place kicking prowess, his general game is probably something that maybe wasn't good enough for international level in terms of distribution, his own threat as a runner or his defence. I think he's brought those parts of his game up to, I suppose, an acceptable or relatively strong standard for Premiership club rugby. But I don't think there is a comparison with Johnny Sexton, for example, in terms of overall ability.
Before we move on to the Munster-Leicester game, like both Leinster and Exeter 2 from 2 and both going very well. Exeter 8 points clear. As you were saying, again, like backing up last year's win, what way do you expect this one to go?
I would call an Exeter home win. I think, they've showed huge promise of late. They've won away in Montpellier, they've won away in Saracens, and they've won 12 of their last 13 competitive games. So on form alone, I would say Exeter are going to be a hugely difficult prospect to go away and win. It would be a huge statement by Leinster to go over there and win in Sandy Park. However, even if they did, Exeter's away form the following week for the game in Aviva on the sellout on the 16th. That's no gimme either. Yeah,
that's the return leg is a game that'll be live on Off the Ball next weekend from the Aviva Stadium. That's a quick look at the current pool standing. So Leinster obviously just having the slight edge there, courtesy of the couple of bonus points. So that's the way that pool 3 stands. The game that'll be live on Off the Ball on News Talk tomorrow is Munster up against Leicester Tigers at Thomond Park. And there was a time, Andy, where this game would have been like the game of the weekend, right? But I mean, two teams with a strong legacy in Europe, a strong tradition of competitiveness against each other. I think it's the 9th time they'll have met in Europe this game tomorrow, but really things haven't gone either their way over the last couple of years.
Oh, well, it is a game of great history, like you mentioned. Donegal Callan spoke during the week about Munster's first European Cup loss in Thomond Park, where the hoodoo was broken by Leicester Tigers famously. And it wasn't just broken, it was obliterated. Leicester came over and I think won 33-0 in Thomond Park. Donegal said at the time it was almost a relief to the players and the playing group because they built up such momentum, they built up such pressure that every home game, it became nearly too intense to keep that record going. So in a way, bizarrely, Donegal said that kind of opened the pressure gauge, and they were able to continue and just concentrate on their performance after that. I suppose you move 7-8 years on from that time, neither team are as dominant a force as they were in Europe at that stage. Both teams have what I think is kind of, new players in new positions and combinations. Munster are still grappling with their out half, for example, where Leicester, in comparison of George Ford and Ben Young, so they've quite an established half-back partnership. However, Leicester have moved a lot around in their back row in terms of personnel and changes there. So, they're probably both, while it is a bit of a cliche, you could say both teams in transition relative to their European Cup histories, which are quite rich.
And transition is certainly one word you could use for Munster. From what you've seen from the opening 2 games of the Van Graan era, it certainly seems that it's just the Rassie Erasmus era continued. Is that a fair point to make?
Well, yeah, there's no discernible change in their playing style. And I think perhaps that's a choice by Van Graan. You're coming into a group right in the middle of a competitive period. I think it probably, regardless of how ambitious you are as a coach, to change style, lock, stock and barrel, apart from being a hugely difficult thing, is probably not advised, particularly right in the middle of pretty hot competition. I wouldn't be surprised if over time you see an evolution in their play. It is heartening to see they've scored 36 points in their last 2 games, so they're scoring freely. However, I think Van Graan may look to impose his own style and imprint on the team maybe in the next 2 to 3 months. But I think he's quite happy to just absorb himself into the background, continue the momentum they had under Erasmus, and not kind of come in and be a bull in a china shop initially.
Is it almost a shot to nothing for Andy? Like in a lot of ways that he isn't. People aren't going to be overly critical, really, of him. Kind of no matter what happens, they might be critical and have been of the process that's sort of lent him to get that far. But I mean, really, in terms of the result, it's not going to be Van Graan's fault almost one way or the other.
Yeah, he is in a very. It's quite a rare position in professional rugby. It's obviously it's not rare in professional football. We see sackings on a regular basis, and it's not typical in any professional rugby season I can recall in the last 5 to 10 years where a coach just leaves in terms of taking on another option mid-season. The one person, while he rarely has been criticised, probably because he's such a good bloke, was Erasmus. He's a bit of a darling of the media, hugely charismatic character and very popular with players and staff alike. However, I did note Neil Francis was quite critical of the fact he still left mid-season, regardless of how nice a person, how good he's been, and he obviously dealt very admirably in a very difficult period for Munster. However, he did leave mid-season. So it wasn't an ideal setting for Munster, I'm sure. I think Van Graan taking the reins hasn't really got anything to lose. Just like you said, Owen, he... if they lose, he's going to be told he's got time to bet in. If they win, he's doing reasonably well. He's assimilated himself into the culture and he moves on. So yeah, it's a strange setting and scenario for him, but we'll see how it goes.
Some of the Munster players this week have been talking about how they've dealt with that obvious turbulence before. Is that something they can learn from again? They've been through something obviously far more turbulent in the past couple of years, but they've now got this in the mid-season. As you say, it is quite unusual in itself, in its own respect, as an isolated thing. This is quite a strange thing to happen, that a coach would change mid-season. But they've been through something even tougher than this before. Do you think that would galvanise them even further?
No, I don't think it's going to galvanise things. What I do think is that your modern day professional is robotic without being critical of anything about personality. I think there's an element of being robotic. You just got to get on and do your job. I listened to Shay Given last night on News Talk speaking, about the tragic death of Gary Speed, but also being told he had to play a game 90 minutes later. And when asked how did he cope in that scenario, he said he literally went into robot mode. He said, "This is my job. This is what I've always done," and he ran autopilot. I think there's an element of that's going to happen with the Munster players. They are, there's a culture of resilience there over 20, 30 years. They've had setbacks, they've had tragedy, but the players themselves are quite hardened. They're well able to deal with challenges. I think the resilience side of things is just something that will hold them through in a steadfast sense. I don't think this change will galvanise anybody, but I do think they'll be able to cope as players and individuals. Yeah,
it does strike me actually that it's not the particularly most healthy or holistic approach actually in terms of dealing with that situation. That might be, there's probably a Saturday panel in that, Andy, that might end up coming back to at some point.
Yeah, I'd imagine so.
Just on that game, I mean, it's to wrap on it, it's a must win here for Munster so quickly in the season. Are they going to get it done?
I'm going to back Munster on this one, just based on the recent form as well, and the history of the fixture. A big turnout in Thomond Park, pretty aggressive and boisterous crowd. I'd back Munster for the home win. Yeah, just a quick look at the table there. So it's Leicester and Munster very much fighting it at the top, but the other two still in the mix as well. Just one other Munster story, Andy. I don't know if you've seen the newspapers this morning, but reports that Tiernan O'Halloran is wanted by Munster to replace Zebo, obviously, who leaves at the end of the season. I'm sure Andrew Conway would want his say in that position as well, but that would actually seem to be a move that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, I think it's while obviously if it's going to go ahead, it would be hugely disappointing for Connacht Rugby, particularly a homegrown guy who's been part of the revolution down there in Galway, and obviously has had great success winning the Pro 12. In terms of Tiernan's Irish prospects and his Irish career, I think it's a hugely beneficial move both for him, and I think it would be a great signing for Munster. He's a massively exciting player. He's something we don't have a lot in the Irish system, is a back three or outside back player who's capable of beating guys on an individual basis through sidesteps, evasion, or just simple pace. So, it would be a great signing for Munster. I think it would work well for Tiernan's future Irish prospects. Yeah, I know your fans of your former club are already starting to get onto Twitter going, we don't want him leaving Connacht, but I mean, in terms of his own career progression, I think the reality is that certainly even from an Irish point of view, that he's going to get more of a look in if he's there. I do want to just get a quick word with you about another of your former clubs, Harlequins against Ulster this weekend. Ulster copped a bit of stick over the last few weeks, like they are grinding out results, but maybe not putting in amazing performances. Stockdale is back. How do you see this one going?
Well, I'm not sure actually. Is that in where is that game?
That's in Quins.
In Quins, yeah. It's been a tricky year for both sides actually. They haven't really been that consistent in the results. If I had to make a quick call on it, I'd go with a home win for Harlequins. Very simply, just based on
loyalty and nothing else.
A bit more loyalty there. Yeah, I was talking to Keith Wood here last night, and we reminisced on the old Harlequins days. So my choice there may be tinted with a bit of memory or nostalgia rather.
I don't know if you can break client privacy legislation. He was in for some work, was he?
He popped into the clinic last night. To be honest, it was just for a coffee. I'd like to say it was to look after his damaged shoulders, but it was more for a chat.
Good stuff. Andy, listen, a pleasure as always. Thanks a million for taking the call.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Andy Dunn there on the line from Andy Dunn Physio Limited.
Is that the plug?
Yeah, I mean, it's Google Andy Dunn Physio. I'm sure I should have asked him before he left. It's 33 minutes past 8 o'clock on this Friday morning. Delighted to have you with us. We've lots of good stuff to come. There's also some bad news to come on before the end of the show.
Is it to do with everybody's favourite segment?
Absolutely, yeah. Bad news.
You're going to have to break it to us all.
I'm stealing myself to try and come up with some phraseology around how I should actually word it, because it's... I mean, devastating news. Is that overstating it?
Just do it like a plaster. Just tell us quickly and let it be over.
We'll do it before 9 o'clock. Right, we're going to hear a little bit more from Warren Gatland, I think, right now. Here he is at the Stella Cinema with Ger and Brian and Keith last night. And here he is talking about, of course, it came up, Sean O'Brien.
Was it slapped into reverse from Sean? Were you both as honest as you might have been?
I just said to him, he rang me and and said he was disappointed how things were reported, that people only just picked up on the negatives. There were lots of positives about the tour. And there was a couple of points I made to him. I said, Sean, you came in, you didn't train for the first 2 weeks, and then you've made a couple of statements to say that you were in the best shape of your life by the end of the tour. And I went, well, we must have done something right for you to get you in the best shape of your life. And then I said, you look at the training sessions. I said, for us, a long training session's 45, 50 minutes. And people go, that's as long as we basically train for. And he said, I really enjoyed the training sessions. I thought they were short and sharp, and maybe get really well prepared for the matches. So I kind of went, well, what are some of the issues? And so, look, we'd all do things differently. What you've got to understand as well is that, part of my role is that I've got a group of players and I'm trying to manage them, and I'm disappointed with myself in that first test because we were a bit heavy-legged, and not because I don't think because of the training, because we'd been in 10 hotels within 2 weeks. We hadn't had a day off, the travelling and stuff, and I think there was a accumulation of arriving in New Zealand on the Wednesday, playing the first game on the Saturday, a week or so of recovering from jet lag, and yes, we were a little bit heavy-legged. So, and I was pissed off with myself, reflecting and having a look back on our preparation for that first test. So, and I'd spoken to a group of senior players about that, which Sean wasn't a part of. But so I've got a group of players that are preparing, and I'm trying to get them right. And on the other hand, I've got coaches who are saying, we haven't coached enough.
We need more time.
We need more time. We're not prepared. We're up against the All Blacks. And so you're playing this balancing act between trying to satisfy the coaches, and you're saying to coaches, you're saying to Andy Farrell, in this training session, you've got 6 minutes of a defence block. That's all you got. And you're saying to someone else, well, you're playing the session, you've got 6 minutes, and nothing. I'm underdone. I'm not prepared. So it's that fine line. I don't think Sean was aware of that. In terms of that's part of the challenges of being the head coach.
Yeah, sure. They're all good friends again. Warren Gatland there speaking to the lads at the Stella Cinema in Rathmines last night, and we had Dave Butler in contact with us on Twitter, wondering if and where and when he can get a podcast of all of that good stuff. Just a bit of patience, Dave. That's all we require. And also, if you tune into Off the Ball on News Talk tonight, you will be able to hear most of that, I think, conversation from last night. I do recommend it. I would scrap whatever other plans you have for world domination or anything else, or even just going for a few pints, and make an appointment to listen to Warren Gatland on Off the Ball this evening. Right, you are tuned to OTB AM on this Friday morning. It's Adrian and Eoin with you, as it is always on a Friday morning. It's 8:37. If you're on your way to work, do let us know what you're up to, and wrap up. Well, as we said earlier on, it's absolutely freezing cold outside.
If they're on their way to work, I imagine what they're up to is going to work.
Yeah.
I'm just a psychic already. They don't need to tell us what they're up to.
No, but I mean, like, what's going on? I don't mean like, here I am on the bus and, the guy in front of me has farted. I mean, like, what's going on with life?
Okay. And just a general question, what's going on, yeah?
The Guggenheim Museum.
Ah, there you go.
In Bilbao. Pete on sound, all over it.
He's a big Spaniard. He knows Spanish and Spain better than anybody.
Modern Art Museum. Would that do for you?
I will, yeah. I must go there and check it out.
Are you into modern art?
I am actually, yeah.
Yeah. It's sort of contemplating life and...
better than that Renaissance shite, anyway.
It's quarter of the day, quarter of the week. We're right there.
You want to have a look at the back pages? Andrei Kanchelskis, rather, who's... I'm getting mixed up with the tennis player right there. No can do, Jose. Is what he's saying, the former winger. The most pragmatic winger of all time is what I would say. Giving out about Jose being overly pragmatic. That's the back of the Irish Daily Star. We had a hot take on that earlier on about it generally being a load of bollocks. Scroll back in the timeline and have a listen to that. The Irish Times sports section leads with rugby all the way, and it's so much to admire in the rise of Exeter.
to Europe's elite. We've been just having that conversation with Andy Dunn about the fairly meteoric rise of Exeter, and they haven't spent a huge bunch of cash. Munster wanting O'Halloran to replace Zebo, and more match previews there on the Irish Times with John O'Sullivan and Gavin Comiskey this morning.
On the back page of the Times Ireland edition, it's to do with Bilbao 2020. If we qualify for the Euros that year, we will be going to Spain to play Spain away. They will be in our group. Ireland get 2020 Bilbao trip, reads the headline on Gary Doyle's story.
Philip Quinn is also addressing that same story in the back page of the Irish Daily Mail this morning. Spanish test, Ireland will face La Roca if they qualify for Euro 2020. So Bilbao will host games and Dublin will host games, and it'll all be a bit weird if we don't actually make it. Gunners make it 6 of the best. Who really cares about the Europa League is certainly one thought I'm having looking at some of the back pages today.
But it's a good one on the back of the Sun, a bad baiting.
Hey, that maybe actually that could well be it, like it's in the vernacular. That could actually be headline of the day.
Absolutely.
What's the bait and batten? What's the
Batty Borisov?
Borisov.
So maybe it's more a bad batting.
I'm going for baiting. That's
Ell of a draw for 2020 reads the big one there. And of course, story of the day, cash and curry for Ashley, as Mike Ashley and Amanda Stavely sit down for a curry dinner in London.
Try and explain that one again. I
was talking about our curry expertise.
Let's not go back.
Yeah.
The Irish Daily Mirror this morning. It's come on Abo, come on Auba to our place. It's Friday morning, right? Big Sam ready to launch £60 million January raid for Aubameyang as the man to replace Lukaku. Everton about to splash the cash.
On the front page of the Irish Examiner sports section, the Exeter factor reads the headline. That's to do with Roger's story on Exeter as they limber up to play at Leinster this weekend.
We're going to have a quick chat about the... I'll just grab that. The Examiner this morning is always writing some interesting stuff, as Ronan O'Gara in his Friday piece of the Examiner, and there's lots of stuff in there this morning about various bits and pieces. It's less kind of, the last few weeks have been kind of dominated by his move to the Crusaders and how that all came about and what he's going to be doing when he's going on there. So he's kind of moved on a little bit from that now. I guess he kind of wants to park it for the next few weeks. Not long, I don't think, until he actually makes the move down under. But there's a lot of stuff about Joey Carberry. O'Gara specifically addressing the Joey Carberry situation, because there's been a lot of talk over the last few weeks that maybe the Leinster player should move Leinster and get himself some regular out-half rugby elsewhere, maybe even in Ireland. If you look at the case of Jordy Murphy that O'Gara talks a bit about here. But O'Gara is very much of the mind that Carberry stays put at Leinster. He fights it out for his place. He says the worst case scenario when Carberry gets up in the morning is that he's back up to Johnny for Leinster and for Ireland. After that, he could have 10 years steering the ship for Leinster. That's kind of the point, that it's stay put, you're still a young guy, you're going to get your opportunities, Johnny's not going to last forever, and Ronan O'Gara is very much saying you need to stay put.
I agree. I do agree. I do agree, though, that he needs to stay put for the time being. Like, I think this is a wholly different conversation if Johnny Sexton is still the out-half that he is in 2 years' time, or even in 1 year's time. Like, Joey Carberry started a test match against Fiji and did very well. He can play at that level, and he's going to get even better.
Played in the All Blacks game in Chicago as well, didn't he?
Of course, yeah, of course. So what am I talking about? But, he can get to a level that is similar to Johnny Sexton, and Johnny Sexton is, according to most of the rugby pundits we have on our show, is the best out-half in the world. The ceiling that this guy has is sky high. It's incredible. So that's what it comes down to in a year's time. I think he's that good that it is going to become a problem for him if he's not playing big Champions Cup games on a regular basis, because he probably will play them at 15, especially from next season. You're also looking at Rob Kearney's trajectory, because as I said earlier, I don't.
Jeez, you're retiring every. Oh, no, you're retiring a bunch of.
I'm not retiring. I'm talking about trajectory. I'm talking about potential injuries. I'm talking about the potential that this conversation about Carberry's position isn't completely over yet. I think he's a 10 as well.
You think he's going to be at 15, do you? Is it?
No, I'm saying that I think he's a 10.
Okay.
I'm saying let's not forget that 15 is still a viable possibility here. He's still a young guy, and if he wants to stay at Leinster, and if Johnny Sexton has a number of years left in him, which he quite probably does.
Yeah, I think at 32 he probably still does.
Yeah, so if he wants to stay at Leinster, then there has to be some sort of arrangement there, because he's not a guy you can leave on the bench.
Sheahan has retired most of the sort of over 30 Leinster and Ireland players, is the hot take.
Well, if you want Joey Carberry to be Ireland's best next number 10, get to Johnny Sexton's level and fast track him there, then you've got to retire Johnny Sexton straight away, don't you?
Well, I mean,
To say that I'm looking to retire them is a completely ridiculous point. I'm putting that into the perspective
obviously I'm overstating your position for effect.
Yeah, like it's...
I'm misrepresenting your point, Owen, is what's happening there.
Precisely.
I mean, you know, it's just what we do around here.
I'm saying this conversation is going to be completely different 12 months down the line.
When Johnny Sexton is retired.
No, I'm saying when Johnny Sexton is still there and Joey Carberry is not getting any game time at 10.
Okay.
Because now it's fine. Like, there's only so much you can learn from not playing. And I still think he's in the process of being a sponge and learning from the best out half in the world. In a year's time, how much more does he still have to learn from not actually playing at 10 in big games?
He needs to get in. That's
There's only so much you can learn by playing 10 against Ospreys.
He also talks about, like, I mean, because it's interesting, you talk about the best 10s in the world, and Bowden Barrett is obviously certainly in that conversation.
But it's the comparison with Carberry, isn't it?
Exactly, and Carberry himself has said that he looks at Bowden Barrett and he's playing 15 and he's playing 10, and actually that's just fine. And O'Gara also gives away the little nugget that Carberry recently got to sit down in the Shelbourne for a coffee with Dan Carter, who's been here rehabbing at the Santry Sports Clinic.
Good opportunity.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
What's so Carter is like based here? He
was over for 3 weeks. Was the information that we had, getting some work done.
Right. Okay. Yeah. The man who, of course, put in a good word for Ronan O'Gara, you'd suspect, down in New Zealand.
Yeah, you would think so. Yeah. So that's the Examiner. So the Herald. Front page of the Herald this morning is face-off here, Derby Day in Manchester, and Liverpool set the season light. Lots of coverage of the two derbies. There'll be full live coverage and commentary both of those games, by the way, on Off the Ball and News Talk on Sunday.
On the back page of the Irish Independent, it's Colin Keyes' story that Wexford's team costs increased by €250,000, and I might just go into this in a little bit more detail because he says essentially the point here is that the cost of relative success in the GAA is just skyrocketed, and in terms of Wexford's amounts, these are the ones that are most notable. Potentially it's because you've got Davy Fitzgerald coming in and you've got Banty coming in, two big personalities. Of course they expected the footballers to go a lot better. It didn't happen. Even after the league they expected things to go well, so they're not only bowing down to big personalities, they're bowing down to two guys who they thought would get huge results. Of course Davy was quite successful, so they spent €945,224 last year on all hurling and football teams. That's an increase of $250,000, 36% on their 2016 spending, which is, if that's the rate of inflation right now and running a GAA team, then it's going to go completely out of control. It's an outlier though, you would imagine, because you look at the income at Wexford and it's gone from 2.5 million in 2016 to 3 million. That's including an additional 150,000 in commercial and fundraising activities. So while they're giving all this extra money to the disposal of Davy and to Banty, of course it's not Banty anymore, they are also doing a lot more fundraising. It doesn't state how they've managed to go about this, but you'd imagine it's just more
supporters clubs and
more testimonial dinners, stuff like that.
The managers are right, obviously. That's the first personality. It's their right to come in and say, we demand that we get all these extra facilities. Like Warren Gatland was talking last night about the Welsh Rugby Union and the amazing facilities they've built in the Vale for the Welsh Rugby team, and how they've just spent another £1 million putting in a cryotherapy chamber, a wrestling room, which I thought was fascinating, all these other recovery and fitness facilities. Like, the managers are correct to go, here, if you want us to get to this level, here's all the stuff we're going to need to get there. And it's a long-term plan, obviously. It's up to the Wexford County Board to manage that and say, well, you can have that, but you can't have this. And like, that's the spend will ultimately, they get to decide what they're spending.
I'm not saying money's everything here, but Cork jumped 27% from 1.37 million to 1.74 million. That's kind of a similar jump to the jump that Dublin spent. 1.75. Oh, sorry, no. Cork are just below the 1.75 million now that Dublin spent in 2011. Now that's across 4 teams, and they went deep into August in all 4 codes, of course, winning the football All-Ireland. So that's the sort of jump that's required. Cork obviously made a noticeable jump with regards to hurling this year. How much of that is actually going into the football now remains to be seen, because obviously that was a disastrous campaign. But certainly in the hurling side of things, you're seeing instant results. With Dublin in 2011, you see instant results. As I said, I'm not saying money is everything, but in a lot of cases here, you do get instant gratification for your money. Wexford, certainly in one code, is another example.
Yeah, and also, like, I mean, that short-term thing of the hurling team are successful, so let's pour a load of money in there and not worry too much about the football because it's not great at the minute. That's in my view, exactly the way not to do it. And we've spoken on the show as well about the idea of actually somebody at some higher level stepping in and saying, so the FAI got a lot of stick for giving their $5,000 to League of Ireland clubs to go and build a strategic plan. Actually, that totally makes sense to me. Yeah. That you would go and build that strategic plan and actually put it some sort of a long-term plan in place to, like, some of it comes with success and some of it doesn't, but like success isn't always winning Leinster Championships or Munster Championships or All-Irelands. Success can be, something very different. I should say as well, by the way, that pretty significant breaking news in the world of news this morning is that the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has said that Brexit deal will see no physical infrastructure or related checks or controls on the Irish border.
Great news.
That is good news this morning at coming up on 10 to 9.
I presume because it's a push notification, it's not just him saying what he wants. This is actually done.
I'm going to assume that the push notification from News Talk is suggesting that there is going to be no physical border. I mean, I think we all assumed that's where we were headed at some point or another. Once the Brits actually decided that they were going to tell us what was going on. But that is good news.
We might move on to the English sports pages. It's interesting. I think something that everybody's interested in is just the latest TV rights deal, and the next one for the Premier League is up for the 2019 through to the end of the 2021-2022 season. And the big changes that are going to happen, the changes that are confirmed in an exclusive here by Ben Rumsby, the sports news correspondent for the Daily Telegraph, is that entire rounds of games will now be made live. So, like on the Champions League, if you've got BT Sport at home, you can watch whatever game you want. That will become the case for the Premier League. You can watch any game you want. Now, this isn't going to happen in the usual time slots. This is going to happen in midweek and on bank holidays. So the bank holiday Mondays are now going to become big Premier League match days when you'll have them across all the BT Sports channels or all the Sky Sports channels. That is, if they get the rights. Now, in terms of who is actually going to be in the bidding war for this, there's been plenty of kind of interest, certainly from Facebook, from Twitter, that they might actually come and get involved in this. By the sounds of Ben Rumsby here, the next set of bids is going to be a little bit too soon for them, particularly for Amazon. Right. They certainly got the exclusive ATP Tour tennis rights last August, something that Sky were also going for. The owner of Amazon has a 66 billion net worth, so he's certainly got the welding power to do this, but whether or not he's going to do it for the next rights, I don't think it's going to happen. It's interesting though, they've broken it down into 7 different packages that are up for tender. It will probably be kind of a duopoly within these 7, but the big news then in terms of one of the packages is that there will be 32 matches on a Saturday at 5:30 p.m, but at 7:30 to 8 p.m. On a Saturday night, we will also have, it doesn't actually state how many, there's going to be 24 matches between 2 p.m. on a Sunday and 8 matches on a Saturday, 7:45
I can't believe it's taken us this long to eventually decide that Premier League on a Saturday night is the thing that makes sense. Like, people are going to the pub or you're at home or whatever you're doing, it makes absolute sense to be Saturday night football. Like, up to this point it was tended to be La Liga, and like people lap that up in their thousands.
But the thing is,
I'm surprised it's taking this long.
Like, the whole kind of idea of having 2 TVs in the house will now become a big thing, because there is going to be war between Strictly and football. Absolutely. Or X Factor and football. What's it going to be on a Saturday night?
You don't need a TV anymore on it. So.
Well, that's true as well, I suppose. Like, as I say, it will probably be Sky and BT we will be watching our football on all the way through to the end of 2022. It's very interesting though, as I say there, the involvement of Amazon and Facebook after 2022, it looks like it's definitely going to happen. The whole idea of the blackout at 3 p.m, that's not going to change. Like, that's seen to protect lower league football. But it doesn't actually state in terms of Ireland whether or not there'll be more games at 3 o'clock. It'll
eventually trickle down to take in the paddies. One of the interesting things for me too is that the Premier League generally tend to lead the way with these things. So a deal goes a certain way, you get, like you're talking about, the sort of your pick of games at a certain time, and those deals will be watched by Six Nations, the GEA, the RFU. They'll be watched by other rights holders, and they'll be looking to implicate some of that good stuff in their own packages, I'm sure, over the next while.
It's interesting because they've broken up the packages by time, so it's like you can get the Saturday night's package or you can get the Sunday evening's package. So if there were to be a new sort of investor here, like take the NFL for example, Thursday night football last season anyway would have been synonymous with Twitter because you can get all the Thursday night football. They've invested in that package. Whether or not there'll be a new bidder coming in and that'll become synonymous with whatever Saturday night football could be a thing. So that's certainly something that the GAA could look at, as if they suddenly make Sky Sports your Saturday night football home and then Sunday is your RTE home.
All right, we have some bad news to bring you before the end of the show, so I mean, hang around for that. Is that a fairly, I don't know if that's a good selling point or not. And we're also going to get the funky chicken out very shortly, but before all of that good stuff, we're going to hear from John Giles, who was on Off the Ball on News Talk last night, and he's not happy with one Jurgen Klopp.
I take it this week, John, you weren't overly impressed with Jurgen Klopp's behaviour in the win over Brighton last weekend.
Well, I didn't actually see the match, Nathan, but I assume that he was running around like a madman, as he normally does, and Chris Hughton, who's a very, very calm lad, as we know, took exception to it. But I didn't actually see what he was doing. I just see him every week doing the same thing. And I think when you get a hiding 5-1, as Chris did, then you're not going to enjoy somebody running around and jumping around like a madman, you know?
Yeah, I think it's certainly unusual for Chris Hughton not to end up shaking the hands with the opposition manager. I think there was definitely a little bit of the usual exuberance from Klopp during the game. I think the actual issue was that as he was going over to shake Chris Hughton's hand, Mo Salah appeared in front of him, and instead of shaking Hughton's hand, he went and he embraced Salah and then tried to go back to Hughton a little bit later, which maybe wasn't the right way to go about things.
Yeah, well, I'd say... Yeah, I wouldn't say it was a big deal. I mean, that's the way he is, Klopp. That's the way he goes on. I don't think he would mean any offence by it. But, you know, I think he might have been getting on Chris's nerves before that anyway. And certainly when you're beaten 5-1, you wouldn't be in the best of moods, Nathan, that's for sure. But it's unlike Chris. You know, Chris doesn't... He's a very calm individual, and he's a really, really, really good lad. But, you know, Klopp does it match in and match out. And, you know, if I were an imposing manager... I wouldn't be too happy about some of the antics that go on.
All right, John Giles there on last night's show with Nathan. You can check out that full piece on offtheball.com. Now, it is that time of the week on a Friday where we get our panel of experts into studio and we discuss all things football. You can see what all those things football are up here along my left-hand side. Robbie Brady's injury, a tough blow for Robbie Brady. We're going to get into that in a second. The big derbies over the weekend as well. We're going to discuss all of those. Pogba, and we're going to get the lads' Champions League picks. It is the slot we've yet to find a name for, but it does involve this chicken. We'll explain all that in a second. But before all of that, myself and Owen want to welcome our two special guests every Friday to the studio. It's the first time we've had a very full house. Nathan Murphy, welcome.
Good to be here.
Kevin Kilbane, welcome to you.
Thank you very much.
You're both looking very sprightly and fresh for a Friday morning.
No, I feel great, honestly, I always do.
It is the first time we've had everybody in studio. Owen's been away in his jollies, and we've just been discussing there while John was on about the plans for the Christmas.
Can we have a chat around the trip to Hamburg rather than chat around the topic?
Go for it.
May as well go for day 3 here of Off the Ball AM.
Oh, is it? Yeah, the chat about
You know that we're all entering middle-aged man territory except for Owen, because the excitement we get from one of us going away and going on the lash for a week.
Living vicariously through Owen.
Yeah. Well, you know, I did everybody proud. Let's just put it that way.
Good.
Right, so this is the slot that we don't have a name for. Somebody texted in last week and said it should be called Foul Chicken, which I kind of like. Poxy Chicken is where I was at. This is the slot where we have our 5 topics that we've just told the audience what they are, and then after, you are both going to get 2 minutes to talk about that topic, and when the 2 minutes is done, the chicken shall speak. You'll both shall shut up, which in itself is an achievement, and we move on to the next topic. Are the rules clear, everybody?
Yes, clear.
Right. For the chicken to arrive.
We're going to kick off 2 minutes to a bit of a sombre note to begin with. Robbie Brady's got some tendon damage. It seems like Kev, he's going to be out for a substantial period. It's tough time, like nominated for Player of the Month.
Yeah, it is. I think he's played all 15 games this season as well. He has been in great form. You just need to see some of the assists he's been getting over the last few weeks and the goals he's been scoring. He has had a great season. Maybe from last season when he first went in there to Burnley, took a little bit of a while to adjust. He was just really starting to find his feet. I mean, as blunt as it sounds, that's football. That's the way that it is. You can't get away from that. You're one training session, one game away from a serious injury. That's just the way that it is. We all have got to accept it.
The fact that he doesn't have a World Cup upcoming, I'm sure, would have immediately impacted on his thinking.
Yes, of course, that's it. And you always think then, I'm sure if we'd have qualified, it would have been right. That is the target. That's where I'm going to be going to. Probably trying to speed up his recovery, trying to maybe cut corners. I've seen it been done before with lads at clubs that I've been at when they've been going to major tournaments.
Anything to get yourself back.
Exactly, and it doesn't necessarily. Well, it rarely ever works out, does it? We've seen it with various players. So I think that's the luxury that he does have, and maybe one thing that's in his advantage, that he can actually just focus on getting the rehab done right, and that'll be done right with Burnley.
The big thing is that he'd been flying, as we've been saying, at his club. He turns 26 next month. We know the trajectory of his career up to this point, but the way he'd been playing, you could have expected quite easily that if he continued that form, to the end of the season, he could have been looking at a move up.
Yeah, thankfully these are no longer career-ending injuries, but it feels much like Seamus Coleman's. It's definitely a career-changing injury, in that Seamus Coleman last summer may well have been the time when he got his move. Now we still have no sign of Seamus actually coming back. Would a team even take a risk on Seamus next summer? Possibly not, if he hasn't played enough football. And again, you look at Robbie Brady, the same. He's definitely not going to get a move next summer. He's probably looking 2 years down the line. He's at a totally different stage of his career, and it was the best he's ever played. The confidence he showed in the last few weeks.
That's what happens on the chicken speaks.
No, that's a great point on the
I'm just thinking
career change.
That's a good point.
I was just thinking that was at least 2 minutes, and I had probably 30 seconds.
First time.
Fine.
Yeah. You said first time you made a good point. That go under the radar. But
there's not even time to challenge that assertion that Robbie Brady would have got a move to a bigger club.
No, it's not that he would have.
I mean,
I think Seamus Coleman, it removes the possibility that like, if he kept going, like this was comfortably the best he's ever played at Premier League level. The little flicks, the confidence in himself, he seemed to change. But
I definitely think you could have expected that he would have got a move to a bigger. If he continued, nominated for Player of the Month in the company.
What position are Burnley in the Premier League?
5th, 6th.
Yeah, they're not going to end up there. I mean, they're not a top 5 club.
No, but
they're not a top club.
It's highly perceivable that they're going to finish 7th or 8th.
Yeah, but it's like N'Golo Kante.
Right, the chicken.
Kante won the Premier League, but
wages on.
Yeah, wages.
The chicken is not happy. So. Paul Pogba is our next topic that we want to get into. I'll set the 2 minutes going there. And Graham Souness and John Giles, particularly over the last while, have been very critical of Paul Pogba. All style and no substance is the short story here. That the comparison was made that he's the Cantona, Pogba's the Cantona to Keane's Matic almost.
Well, he was actually quite poor midweek against CSK Moscow.
He's trying to circulate that thought and trying to figure out what. Go on, sorry,
yeah. Can I finish my point?
No, go for it, absolutely.
No, it's fine, yeah. It's okay.
30 seconds in, so...
Yeah, there you go. No, he was quite poor. He was almost watching like the Pogba of last season midweek. Would that have been because Matic wasn't alongside him? I don't know. I just think it was perhaps one of those nights for him. He was excellent last week. I was at the Emirates last weekend when he was superb, and I don't necessarily go along with that theory of John Giles and Graham Souness that he's maybe a player that the game passes him by. He doesn't do enough in games. I think he started to have more of an influence there at Man United. I think he's starting to take the game. I think he started to have an influence, certainly from a creative point of view. He might not necessarily always be the assist, but if you look at someone like Kevin De Bruyne at Man City, he invariably would have the key pass within a move that would lead to the assist. So I think he's having more of an influence, and I've been impressed with him this season. So I think he's having a good season, yeah.
The only criticism he can have, I think, is in his goal scoring. He's never reached double figures yet during a league campaign. Souness touched on that last night. If he does get to double figures, maybe he then needs to take a step back and realise he's a different type of player. Like, the comparison of Keane and Cantona isn't relevant because, firstly, Keane is 3 times the player Nemanja Matic, and Pogba and Cantona don't play in anywhere similar position. I think we're talking 2 old school pundits, men of a certain vintage who like to play the game a certain way, and they look at Pogba and see him as being the embodiment of everything that's wrong with current.
Yeah, there's an element of that. I do think as well that when you listen to John and when you listen to Graham, when the way that they analyse games, I think there is certainly most definitely a place for how they go about their analysis. I really do think that. But Pogba is that.
It's too short.
He's that social media footballer, isn't he? He's that soundbite.
He's the most marketable player in the Premier League by a country mile.
Like they'd spoken about the showboating and that not celebrating goals with their teammates.
I take that. Sometimes it can be a bit too much, but
that's the modern player for you.
You couldn't do that back in the 70s and 80s because you could nail. If somebody was showboating, you could nail them. Now you can't.
Well, I don't think you could have got stripes through your hair, Owen. But sorry.
But also in the 1970s, you didn't have these stupid average position maps. It's like, Pogba was playing very further in front of the halfway line, therefore he can't dare play as a midfield too. What if he's brilliant without the ball in that position, 10 yards in front of the halfway line? That's the one thing that really gets to me. Just stop at your average positions.
The Robbie Brady point wasn't valid, but that's valid.
That was pretty good. Okay, right, we'll set the next 2 minutes, and the talking point here is the Manchester Derby. So I guess the point being whether we use the Chelsea game as a guide to how United are going to play, and I mean we're assuming that it's going to be pretty tight from United's point of view. This
Pogba been out, I think, removes any doubt that there's anything but Mourinho parking the bus, that the Arsenal game last week will be an exception because they just don't have the player to fill that role, somebody who can transition the ball forward quickly 20, 30, 40 yards. If he goes with Herrera and Matic, I think they're just going to sit back. And also you look at the teams that City have played over the last couple of weeks and the teams they've struggled to break down. they're all just sitting back. Like Huddersfield didn't even really play with a striker, and they're struggling to break those teams down at the moment. United are better defensively than all those sides, so I'm thinking this is, you sit, you keep it tight, and just try and steal.
Get out of dodge with a 0-0.
It's the only sensible thing to do.
No, I don't necessarily see that. I think United, the way that they played last week, showed to me that they can be devastating on the counter-attack. They can sit in and soak up a little bit of pressure, yet still have the element of the attacking side within the ranks. But I don't think he'll play both Martial and Rashford. I think Lingard probably will play for his energy that he'll probably bring to the side. Given that he left Lingard and Ashley Young out midweek, I think they'll both start. So I'm looking at this weekend. It wouldn't surprise me if he brought in Fellaini and he went, I tell you what, let's be physical against them, man for man. If Silva's fit, man for man against Silva and De Bruyne. Let's try and stop them. Let's try and get in the faces. Herrera could do that job. I'm not so sure Fellaini could do that job. I don't think he's got the energy to live with one of those two. The
one concern I'd have is that Mourinho after the Chelsea game was talking about, so they concede that goal after whatever it was, 55 minutes, and Mourinho's talking about how they were emotionally gone after that goal. Like, I find that bizarre against a team that's like it's one of the top 4 teams.
Do you not think that's just like a soundbite? It's just something that just comes out.
But he's saying to his players, you had checked out. Once Morata went, you lost your heads. He's saying that to his players. Surely that's actually part of his job, is to make sure they don't lose their heads.
Yeah, but it depends. What influence can he have from the touchline on that when a goal goes in the second half? That's maybe your point within that.
Yeah, I don't know. Thank God the 2 minutes were up on that one. Right. Right, on to the other derby for the weekend. Both of these games live on Off the Ball on News Talk. By the way, you're at the Merseyside derby, all right? Keep your passions.
At the Manchester
try and keep your passions in check there.
I always do. Fair.
Right, free scoring Liverpool against Everton, who've 6 points in their last 2 games, Kev. The impartial voice here in this.
6 goals in the last 2 games.
Some quality players have played in these fixtures over the years, and then there's you.
Was that just before he nailed you?
Thanks for that.
That was he just before he got sent off.
I think that was at Goodison. I think we won that game actually.
Right.
But it's not something it's not something I want to talk about.
Was that the angriest you've ever been?
Angriest I've ever been in a game? Oh no, I've been
certainly the angriest you've ever looked.
I've been angry. What I used to do in games before I'd start, I'd always used to say, if I was particularly playing in a game like that, usually David Weir or Alan Stubbs would have been playing right side centre half, and I used to say, just hang it up 10-15 yards inside me, and then I can just travel.
Put the elbow in, is it?
Well, not the elbow, just give him a little.
Who are you going for? Stevie Finnan?
Would have been Finney, might have been
Jan Kroenkamp.
Carragher would have played there as well. One of the big ones, yes. So we would have had some.
You versus Carragher.
Great battles.
You're saying you'd have come out on top of that?
I'd like to think so.
Right.
Physically, yeah.
13 goals in their last 3 games for Liverpool's front 4, 22 in the last 7. I think Everton are going to sit as deep as possible. Big Sam will have learned plenty of lessons from the nightmare under Ronald Koeman and how bad they are defensively. Yeah. They'll just sit as deep as possible. Yeah. Like I'd say they would take.
Well, Koeman last season when they were such a young side, I could not believe the side that he put out in that Merseyside derby, because Everton were flying at the time. I think there was a way that Everton could have got at them, and he played such a young team. Sam Allardyce will not make that same mistake. I think he'll go there with as much experience as possible.
The worst thing they could do is get into some sort of an emotional, proper Merseyside derby brawl, because that will play into this Liverpool side's hands.
I don't know.
I think 100%, because once mistakes start,
Kev thinks float her up there, put the elbow in.
Well, I think there'll be an element of that.
This isn't a tough Everton side.
I will disagree with that.
One last point, take this or leave this, you'll probably disagree with us, but Liverpool have the greatest disparity in attacking quality and defensive quality of any big team this century.
Is that a true fact, or
no? It's a take. It's what I think.
A hot take.
Oh, right.
It's Sheehan's hot take.
Jeez.
Would there not have been?
I'm looking for something to back this up.
Yeah, I mean, because what you're suggesting is their defence is the worst.
Well, I said top 6 team. I meant Premier League, not top 6 European team.
Okay.
One thing I would say as well, why I'm worried really from Everton's point of view, I don't see Everton being able to sit in and break against that Liverpool side. There's not enough pace in Everton's team to do it. So that's the one thing where I think if you can get at Liverpool, if you can soak it up, you can stay nice and narrow, which they will do. But where is the attacking option going to come from? It's going to have to be from a set play.
Liverpool and City?
I'm going to go for a draw at Anfield. And I'm going to go for Man United.
Both.
City.
Right.
Yeah.
Liverpool and City.
Tipping Manchester United was probably the worst take of this segment. Manchester City and Liverpool.
Right, the final 2 minutes we're going to do, it's just a bit of a wrap on the Champions League to get your picks of who you think is going to make the final, who's going to win the thing. So it's 5 Premier League teams into the last 16. We don't know, Spain final in 2016.
Yeah.
Are we headed that way for Premier League?
Yeah.
Do you think?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think, again, the conversation on TV3 I thought on Tuesday night was good in that we're looking at Real Madrid now. Real Madrid could be a very different team.
I'm with you there.
February, March.
They know how
we're
to do
assessing
it.
them on the struggles they're having at the moment. I still look at all 5 of the English teams and think any of them could reach the final. Any of those 5.
I just look at the draw for the next round. Man United, they could get Bayern Munich, Juve, Sevilla or Real Madrid. Essentially, they're going to be tough draws. They're looking for Shakhtar or Porto. Chelsea themselves are going to get PSG, Barcelona or Besiktas. Realistically, if they get Barca or PSG, probably going to go out, aren't they? That's what you would imagine. So Liverpool, Bayern Munich, they could get Juve, Real Madrid themselves, City, Bayern Munich, Juve or Real Madrid. So the law of average, they're going to get a massive draw, and Tottenham are the same as well. They're going to get a big draw in the next round. They could be gone. We could have 3 of those Premier League sides gone in the last.
The only thing about Spurs is obviously that, you know, like it's whatever it is, 3 Premier League teams in the last 17 years that have actually won the Champions League. But Spurs have obviously comfortably won that group. That's one of the great group performances of all time.
It is.
It is the greatest English, like statistically, the greatest English performance points wise in the Champions League era, isn't it?
Is that right? Is that true?
16 points.
All 4 teams. There have been situations before where 4 teams entered the Champions League group stages.
No, I mean Spurs individually. 16 points is the best points tally by an English.
I'm sure some English clubs have won every game of
in the Champions League era.
I'm sure they have.
I think Arsenal came second. I heard it on a national broadcaster last night.
Did you? Well, you might be. You're probably right.
Where did you hear it?
I heard it on RTE last night.
I wouldn't. I mean,
yeah. But no, regardless of it, he's right. Tottenham, I think, in beating Real Madrid. But Nathan's Nathan's made actually 2 really good points today.
Oof.
That's a third.
Fittingly enough, the chicken.
Real Madrid will not be the same Real Madrid come February.
That's the best take in this segment.
Yeah.
And City potentially winning the Champions League, pulling up, I think will be to their advantage as well. That actually
I think they've got a chance. I really do. Yeah. I think Chelsea. I think any one of those. If you get a decent draw, then they've got a great chance, haven't they?
Right, the 2 derbies are live on Off the Ball on News Talk this weekend. It's Liverpool against Everton at Anfield, 2:15 on Sunday. Nathan is going to be there alongside Pat Nevin, Everton legend. And then at 4:30, it's the Manchester derby. It's United against City. And our B team are going to be at that. Dave McIntyre alongside Kevin Kilbane. And then on Premier League Live, on Saturday afternoon on Today FM, it's Tottenham up against Stoke. That's at 3 o'clock. It's at Wembley, and it's Ian Beach and Brian Kerr. So that's what's coming your way upcoming this weekend. Lads, thanks a million for joining us in studio. The hot chicken or whatever else we want to call it is going to come and speak your way again next Friday morning. But for the minute, we're going to take a little bit of clip of Shay Given, who was in with the lads last night.
You know, there was a bit of needle of John Delaney and my dad. I write about that in the book, and years gone by after the game and stuff, and I don't know if he's got a grudge against me because of something my dad said or something. I don't know. I just don't feel it.
What was it with your dad?
It was after one of the games, I think, in the FEI at the time, we're sort of laying off loads of people, and a reporter asked my dad, I think he had a few beers or something after one of the games and stuff, and he just said, like, well, my dad's something like, well, John Delaney should take a pay cut, like, because all these people are losing their jobs and all this kind of stuff, and it was in the front page of one of the newspapers, the national newspaper, saying Shay Given's dad says John Delaney.
You on the phone to him?
Do you know what I mean?
Doing?
Yeah. Well, I am, but at the same time, then this popped up in a meeting I was on for bonuses. I think it might have been for 2012. Me, John O'Shea, Robbie Keane were done talking to John Delaney, and we're talking about bonuses for the whole squad, like as a senior group of players and stuff. And he pops up saying about, what about your dad saying this and this and that? I was raging, like fuming. So what's that got to do with me? Like, you know what I mean? Because I can't stop my dad. He can say what he wants, or people we can, and in a sense he kind of got stitched up a little bit as well, and it wasn't the right time or place for even that conversation. We're talking about something totally different, and then he just randomly comes out of the blue, you know what I mean? So I don't know if there's a bit of history there. I suppose maybe there is, but I just felt that I could have had a phone call of somebody, even the president of the FEI or something. Surely somebody could have run me, Kev.
Yeah, I didn't get a phone call. No, I didn't get a phone call
either, so I feel a lot better now.
All right, that was Shay Given on Off the Ball in News Talk last night. It's 12 minutes past 9 on this Friday morning. Shay Given had funky eyes going on there, hadn't he? There's some sort of camera trickery at play.
Well, like, it's the oldest trick in the book, isn't it? Yeah, like, it's not a new thing. I've never actually seen it happen in the world of HD, though.
No.
It's actually an achievement to make that happen.
Yeah.
It's like one of those, not disposable cameras, but cameras where you used to use film back in my day.
Film,
Adrian,
right, let's give you a flavour of what's coming up on the Off the Ball channels over the weekend on News Talk, on Today FM, and on 98 FM. Here's Jamie Moore, Phil Egan, and Nathan Murphy.
Yes, lads, we have another busy show this Sunday morning from 9 AM. We'll chat to Coola's Leinster winning captain Paul Schutte on if he plans to play for the Dubs hurlers in 2018. Footballer James Chambers on his recovery from depression. We'll find out if Michael Conlon won his 5th professional fight on Saturday night, and check in with the Leinster camp ahead of their Champions Cup game against Exeter on Sunday, plus give you the chance to win tickets to Leinster v Exeter in the Champions Cup at the Aviva next Saturday.
This week on Premier League Live, we're at Wembley for Tottenham against Stoke. Ian Beach and Brian Kerr will be in the commentary box for us. And Jason McAteer is this week's guest in the boot room. So join me, Phil Egan, at 2 o'clock.
All right, lads, it's the big show this weekend. Merseyside Derby, Manchester Derby on Sunday. We're on air from 1 to 7. I'll be at Anfield with Pat and Evan for Liverpool against Everton. Then we're off to Old Trafford. Dave and Kev will be at United against City. Saturday's the morning after the Christmas party, so I don't want to make too many promises about what's coming your way from 1 to 6. We'll have our Saturday panel. We will have Mickey Burke, we'll have Eamon Callaghan and Conor McManus on that. We have a special show then Saturday evening, 7 to 10, Munster against Leicester in the Champions Cup. Dave, Keith Wood and Liam Toland at that one. Busy one, boys.
Yeah, that's Nathan the Moose Murphy there with he just wears his jacket around the office all the time. We do have the Christmas party later on, and Owen's got the Christmas biscuits ready for action.
No, I don't. No,
Have you not?
I didn't
Did
buy
you bring Christmas biscuits back from Hamburg?
No, I think we discussed this earlier. I didn't purchase any Christmas biscuits.
Did you
All
not?
I purchased was Glühwein.
All right.
Okay, so is this going to continue next week? It's like,
I suspect on Monday you're going to be asked how Hamburg was. Yeah.
There's going to be a new presenter rolled out. Just Joe is going to present on Monday or something like that.
We told you a bit earlier on that we've some bad news to bring you, and it's probably time to bring our viewers, bring the audience on that desperate news this morning.
Yeah, go for it. You know,
we're not doing a baryometer today, so apologies for that. People have been in touch in their thousands wondering when it was upcoming, so apologies. You'll have to wait until next week when it'll be reinstated.
Why isn't it?
There was just a view this week that with the Brexit talks going on, there was just a few other bits and pieces about Christmas biscuits.
No, but seriously,
we just
why?
decided that we were too busy. Was the I'm saying we collectively. Pretty much most of the Warren Gatland stuff kind of occupied, but I do. Yes, because what happens is with these shows, Owen, as you well know, that Ger sort of looks after everything from A to Z. So yeah,
Heineken looked after all the commercials.
Not only are there no Christmas biscuits, there's no baryometer this week, so maybe there's some sort of correlation between those two stories. Do keep an eye on the moving swiftly along the off the ball channels over the next few days, because we've got some good Warren Gatland stuff to bring you on. Thanks a million for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Christmas biscuits in for Monday for Ger.
Keep this joke going. It gets funnier the more you say it.
9:15 on this Friday morning. Thanks a million for joining us. We're on the radio again this evening. You can check out the entirety, or at least the vast majority, of Warren Gatland in conversation with Ger on Off the Ball this evening. From us, for the minute, good morning.